Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by the U.S. Army Warrior Fitness Team, which provides awareness of Army opportunities while serving. Team members are active duty soldiers that compete in CrossFit and Strongman, Strongwoman competitions, both nationally and internationally. To learn more, check out the link in our description. On today's episode, I have Brian Friend giving us a first look at the Rogue Invitational Qualifier leaderboard now that it's finalized, and also answering the question if this is the best group of qualifiers to date. Brian, it has been a bit confusing to say the least. Athletes getting disqualified for not following the rules when it comes to weighing the barbells and the plates, then a couple of appeals, but alas, we have almost gotten a complete picture.
Yeah, and the leaderboard is now finalized for the RX division. So if you go to the Rogue website, you can see who finished where, and you can see some of the people that seem to be in contention that ended up not being so. But when you say almost we almost have the full picture, that's because this year Rogue has guaranteed 5 qualifying spots to the top 5 athletes through the queue for both the men's and women's fields. So as we see here, from Chandler Smith down to Tim Paulson, those 5 guys have passed the test. They're good to go. They'll get an invite to Rogue. For people like Henrik Epelainen and Tyler Christoffel, they're still going to have to wait. And my understanding is basically that this is just dependent on a list that Rogue has of the top 10 athletes from the games, and then a few others that they intend to invite either via backfill if the top 10 athletes decline, or as we've already seen in the case of Annie Thorsdottir, who did not compete individually this year, but is a legacy athlete from Rogue, obviously has an incredible pedigree in the sport, that they have reserved the opportunity, being an invitational, to invite certain athletes like that. So they will round this field out to 20 for both men and women. What number of athletes wind up coming from the qualifier is yet to be determined, but at least the 5 men we saw and these 5 women on the screen here down through Bailey Rogers in 5th have done well enough in the qualifier to earn the right to compete in person at the end of October in Austin.
Actually, speaking of Annie Thorsdottir, do you know if there's any other legacy athletes that were expecting to be invited, or is it just her?
Rogue generally keeps that stuff pretty tight. I have not seen anything else come out yet, so kind of waiting with everyone else to see who's going to be those other invites this year.
TBD, TBD. Okay, so we just took a look at the leaderboard. Some really great athletes, and I love what you did in your article that we just published. You organized the athletes that are qualifying in different groups based on their CrossFit journey.
Yeah, and specifically this year, half of these athletes did not have the opportunity to compete in the individual version of the games this year for a variety of different reasons. And we have at the top of both leaderboards, the first and second place athletes fall into these categories in a different way. So we have Chandler Smith, who, if you haven't seen the In the Arena documentary that Challenger Film and Buttery Bros put out on YouTube, it's now
Was
available for
amazing.
free. You can see some of the struggles he had with the environment in Minnesota this year that really didn't let him show his best stuff. So his season was kind of cut short. Of course, he's competed at Can West, and now he's got the opportunity to Rogue, so he's still getting some competition experience, but it's not at the semifinals, or it's not at the games as he would have wanted. The second place guy, Jorge Fernandez, chose to go on a team. They did great. CrossFit Invictus placed 3rd at the games. And then the top 2 for the women were very similar, where you had Manu Nangonis and 4th place Annika Greer, both of whom also had their season cut short due to failure to submit things in the appropriate timeline during quarterfinals, both of whom would have had a great chance to make the games and do well there. And then finally, Olivia Kerstetter, who forewent her opportunity to compete at semifinals individually this year and dominated the girls 16 and 17 division at the game. So in the case of all 5 of these, I'm excited to see them throw their hat in the ring with the individuals that did the best at the games and see where they end up. Some of them chose not to, but now will be competing with the best in the world. And others of them missed an opportunity that they were hoping to have, but now kind of have the next best thing.
I know it's probably hard because so many of these athletes that qualified through the queue have amazing storylines, but is there somebody in particular that you're most excited to see?
I would say for the guys, probably is Chandler Smith, just because as on the back of what happened at semifinals, he was receiving a lot of criticism and scrutiny from that, and I think he was being very humble in that approach. He didn't want the attention on the problems. He just wasn't good enough that week, is I think his mindset. But I think that he will show that he is still amongst the top guys in the world and can compete and do well on several of the workouts at Rogue. And for the women, probably, man, that is tough. But I'll probably choose Olivia Kerstetter. It's just so incredible how many of these teenage athletes on the women's side have basically made a seamless transition in the last couple of years to being relevant amongst the best women in the world. And based on her pedigree, when you stack it up to someone like Emma Lawson and Emma Carey or a Mallory O'Brien, even a Haley Adams, there's really nothing that tells me she's not going to have just as much success.
Okay, so when answering the question, if these athletes are the best that we've seen yet come through the queue, you did a little bit of analyzing, as Mr. Brian Friend does, with our lovely graphs. So you went
Yeah.
back and looked at the athletes. How did you come up with these numbers and these like data points?
Well, this is the fourth year of the Rogue Invitational, and it's the fourth different iteration of how they came to find 20 athletes. In
Mhm.
2019, half of the field got invites and half of the field qualified through the qualifier. That was a live event that took place in Ohio. And of those athletes, they didn't really do that great. Minus Laura Horvath and Margot Alvarez, who were disqualified based on not meeting a minimum work requirement. The 10 online qualifiers finished in the bottom 11 spots at the Rogue Live event that year. The men did much better. You see there, Street Horner, Chandler Smith, and Travis Mayer came through the qualifier, finished fourth, fifth, and sixth, which is incredibly impressive to do, especially the fact that they qualified online, but then showed their prowess in a live competition. And that's what the athletes who qualified this year are striving to do. And that's what I'm most curious to see, if there is a group or maybe even just one that can push into that upper echelon in the live event when we finally get to it. 2020, they reduced the qualification process to a smaller number. And as we see here, even if you scroll down a little further, there were actually 5
Mm.
qualifying athletes on the women's side, 4 of whom participated that year, and 8 qualifying athletes on the men's side. And we could see something like this year, where there's a different number of men and women who ultimately get the invite based on how many of those top 10 are special invites for each sex accept or decline their invitations. And finally, they had 2021, where it was invite only. So they're kind of taking a step backwards here, opening up some spots again to the qualifier this year, which I think is okay and perfectly acceptable to do. We've seen some success in the past for some of these athletes, but a majority of the ones who come through the qualifier end up finishing towards the bottom of the field at the live event.
Okay, so do you think that any of these athletes who qualified online will be top 10, top 5? What are your predictions?
Um, I think that there's a great chance for Chandler Smith to be in the top 10. I think it'll be tough for him to make it into the top 5, but generally the Rogue workouts are pretty good for him in his style
Mhm.
of athlete. And I think Olivia Kerstetter, again, I think she has the best chance to have the highest placement amongst the girls that qualified.
So is this the best group yet?
I mean, that having 3 people from the male qualifier finish fourth, fifth, and sixth in 1 year is incredibly impressive. That was for Street Horner, that was the pinnacle of his career. That's an incredible performance for Chandler and Travis. The Rogue fields are tough. They're deep. These are the 10
Mhm.
best athletes from the games, plus 5 from the qualifiers, plus special invites that are getting those invites for, very good reasons based on their, talent and progress and accomplishments in this sport. So I would say it's unlikely that we'll see 3 people from this group of 10 finish inside the top 6, either men or women's field. But from a storyline perspective, you'd be hard pressed to find a better group of 10 athletes in this.
For sure. What's your bottom line, Brian?
I think the bottom line is I'm glad that the Rogue Qualifier is back and that athletes
Mhm.
whose season was cut short for whatever reason do have the opportunity to earn their way to such a prestigious event through something like the Q.
We look forward to seeing the full leaderboard and everybody who's going. Brian, thank you for taking a first look at the online qualifier. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.